Welcome back to the BDX from Elite Aerosports, video number 3 in the build series. We're probably going to be very close, if not complete, in this video. So we're going to be doing an engine run most likely, so stay tuned for that. Let's dive back into this amazing aircraft. All right, last video we got both of our wings complete and we finished off that video with our light lenses, which worked out absolutely beautiful. So what we're going to work on now is we are starting to get our equipment reinstalled in the aircraft. So we got no equipment installed in the actual fuselage portion, so that's where we need to go from here. So we do have our tanks out of the aircraft, of course, so we're going to start off with these tanks and get them queued up and ready to go. Now, the smoke tank does not have a clunk line on it, so we're going to have to get that set up. The port here is very, very narrow. I'm not quite sure what clunk we're going to fit in there, but we may have to just end up with a tube, and that will be fine. And then we've got the clunk line already done on our main tank. So we're going to take these tanks apart, we're going to clean them out, and we're going to pressurize them to test them. Then the other thing we need to do is we need to get our light mounted on our steering or front leg. So we're going to get that queued up here as well too, so that can dry. And we're probably going to get our Electron gear mounted after the tanks. All right, so we got the bung out of the main tank here. Now the actual pickup line, awesome. This is perfect. We're just going to take these tie wraps off and we are going to lock wire all of our joints, and then we will clean out the tank with rubbing alcohol. All right, so we got our tanks sitting there pressurized, and we'll leave those for a couple hours. And after a couple hours, if we open them up and they let pressure out, then we know they are good to go. So first thing I did on the fuselage here was get our turbine lined up and bolted in place. So that is done. This is gonna have to come back out now to get our smoke tank mounted down there. The other thing I did was figure out what plates we're using. We ended up going with the black plates. I know initially I said the skinnier one, but this one actually with the new pipe brought everything in perfect alignment. And I just put a little bit of CA on these plates, stuck them down, and then I put the turbine on and bolted everything through, just so these plates weren't sliding around and moving. So, and as per usual, we need to give you the typical shot up the exhaust pipe. So there we go. Sweewin 240, perfectly centered in that tail. All right, so I'm just getting the front gear ready here. The gear sits in the fuselage like this, leg points down. So this is where our servo arm is going to go on the whole setup here. And then it comes through the top like this. So our servo output shaft is going to be pointing this way, and it's going to intersect with the steering arm. So first thing we want to do is get this guy installed. Obviously we want to make sure we use Loctite. And then this guy here, so these end pins are typically done by Electron. So yes, that is extremely tight, which is good. This is the pin that holds everything together that makes sure this can rotate. And the other one is that guy right there. Now these pins come with a flat spot on them for the steering arm. So we're going to undo this guy, and that's pretty solidly in place already, but we'll put a little bit of Loctite on this one and tighten that guy down. So from some of the build pictures I've seen on Elite Aerosports website, it looks like the best way to do this is a Z pattern. So something like this for steering. And the reason for that is it keeps everything nice and narrow in the servo mount area here. If you go directly sideways like this, you can see how much further it sticks out from the side of the frame there, versus you go like this and everything just got a whole bunch tighter. So we'll play around with that and see how it works best, but this is ultimately how it goes together. And we're going to put a little bit of lubricant on that shaft as well, and eventually we will flat spot this shaft as well. And in most cases, if you're installing this arm perpendicular or 90 degrees to the actual leg itself, this is really easy because you just get this installed, you can line it up and flat spot this. But because we are probably going to be going at an angle like that, or whatever we're doing like that, we're going to wait to flat spot this guy until we have the steering all set up. All right, so we've got our servo lead plugged in here and everything's done and set up. So right now we've got this gear just sitting on the table. So the table's a nice flat surface and we've installed our leg. Now our leg, essentially to get 90 degrees, all of these flats on all of the leg just flush up with the trunnion itself. And the other thing you can do is you just stand back and make sure your leg is straight. So now that that leg is straight, we've come in here, tightened these guys down, which is going to make a mark on the leading edge of that pin. Now on the nose, I usually only do one set of flat spots. So I'll just do the leading edge here, tighten those down first, and then we'll just snug the other ones down. So now when we pull this leg off, pin marks right on that pin. So now we'll just take our Dremel and make little tiny flat spots. Doesn't have to be crazy. All right, and there's a shot of my flat spots, nothing major. If these are wrong, we just adjust them a little bit, but that's what you're looking for. All right, so we got our gear installed here. Now we want to get it installed for a couple reasons. Obviously, the primary one is we need to install the gear, but the secondary one is so we can check that it works properly. I'm going to straighten that out because it's not plugged in. There we go, so we're all good there. We do have to trim a little bit off the fuselage right on this side right here. It's not overly necessary to do it, but I'll show you here. So we're centered on the wheel right there, and as we come down, we're a little bit offset towards this side of the screen. And at the bottom right there, the leg, when it turns, it does hit the fuselage a little bit. So we'll just draw a line and sand that down just a bit. It doesn't need to be anything major. And then the other thing we want to do is we want to add our plug-in here for our steering servo. So we're going to use a through fitting right there that holds a female connector, and this will just plug into that connector. And there's lots of relief here with the twisted wire going into that location right there. So that is the nose setup essentially done. And the other thing that this allows us to do is to get our landing light installed. So we can, because this leg's so long, we really could put the landing light anywhere on here. We're probably going to go, I don't know, maybe somewhere closer to the bottom, I think. So it's not hidden up here, but we'll probably go near the bottom. So anyways, you can get that figured out as well. All right, so just pulled the gear out so we can get our holes fixed up there with some CA. And I'm just thinking about the battery setup here. And so this is the battery setup that we're using. I know I've kind of talked about it already, but this is the owner's 2 batteries from previous aircraft. So I was going to add another one of these batteries, but we also need another battery for the light system. So this is going to be our battery setup. So we've got a 3-cell for the turbine, we've got a 3-cell for the light system, and then we've got 2 2-cell lipos for the control system and also the landing gear. So that's going to be our battery load on this aircraft. And our XT60 connectors that we have on our website, these are the screw down ones or the glue down ones. And these fit perfectly in between those 2 fasteners. That works out awesome. So we're going to have 2 of these guys here. We can't do anything in the center because the landing gear comes right up there. So we're going to have 2 of those guys there, and then we'll have the 2 red ones. So we'll have red versions of these, which we also have on the side. So that is going to be a great setup for this aircraft. So that means it'll all be color coded with the batteries. So we got black, black, red, red, and the batteries are going to sit in like so. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a tray specifically designed for these batteries. So it's going to be 3D printed that we fasten down to this, and it's probably going to have a Velcro strap that goes over top that holds all of those batteries in place. So I'm going to get that designed because I'll also be using basically the same setup on my BDX as well. All right, and we printed one of these battery trays yesterday on our Bamboo Labs X1 carbon, and we are actually printing another one right now for my aircraft. So that material is PETG carbon fiber. All right, and there we go. What I did instead of messing around with the Velcro is I just put fuzzy Velcro on all the batteries. I mean, that's something that's pretty universal as well. So if I have a battery holder with my batteries, I will always have the fuzzy Velcro on the battery side, so that's just the standard. So anyways, we've added fuzzy Velcro to all the batteries, so now they fit beautifully in there. And this is our battery layout for this aircraft. So that is super cool. And of course, we'll do color-coded connectors like we mentioned previously. So this is ready to go back in the nose, and it's just gonna screw down right there. And there's a shot of it screwed down. So we just have the pan head screws screwing it down, and they're completely countersunk, so there's no screw interfering or touching the battery. All right, so just fiddling around with the front end here, making sure that all this is gonna work so we can plug our batteries in with everything connected there. We're gonna have our 3-cell LiPo plugs coming up on the side like this. They're gonna be glued in place. And then we'll have a 5/8 through fitting going through right in this area here. So the wires will come through, they'll come through, and then they will disappear and head back to our power area. So that's how things are gonna be run for the power section, and we'll do exactly the same thing on that side. So I think what we're gonna do now is we're gonna get our power plugs for the sides high soled into place. We'll just do a little bit of sanding in this area to roughen it up, and we'll get those glued in place. All right, so did some thinking about this smoke tank, and we're gonna make a little bit of a change here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to Dremel off the glue that's holding the fitting onto the fiberglass piece here, and see if we can't get that fiberglass or the bung fitting out. And the point of that is we can put a clunk line on there and then re-glue it back in place. So I'm going to do a little bit of work here with my Dremel bit and see if we can get that out. It should be fairly simple to be able to pop that open. All right, so we got our bung fitting out. That wasn't really a problem, just had to grind down the perimeter there with the small Dremel bit. And we have rinsed the tank out again with some rubbing alcohol. So what we'll do now is we will get this set up where we've got our bung fitting, and we're going to have an extension piece on there, and then we'll put a clunk. And we'll get this all put together, and then we'll basically glue it inside the tank with the clunk and everything there in one piece. This fitting needs to be fairly small because it's got to fit under the wing tube and through the little hole underneath the wing tube. So going with a larger size fitting isn't ideal. The small fitting is ideal. Okay, so our tank is glued. I just put some tape on the fitting there to hold it in place, but that will work perfect. And we've got a nice clunk in there. So that's going to basically make this smoke tank perfect now. So that's a huge positive. Next thing we're adding on is our beacon light, which is the bottom. So this is our red beacon, runs off 3-cell LiPo. It's insanely bright by itself. So again, this is a Skycandy landing light item. But the reflector here as well too is super cool. So basically these LED lights bounce off the reflector piece in there, and this is insane how bright that is. So this is going to be mounted through the belly of the aircraft, so something like this. And we're going to put that probably underneath the tank, right in that front area. I think is going to be the best location. But essentially what happens is you drill a hole this size through the fuselage. It gets glued in place just with some shoe goop, and then there's an O-ring to finish off the other side. So really, when this is actually installed, you've got about the top of my thumb sticking out of the fuselage. So just the reflector portion, and it's super cool. So we got our one board done up here. This is the right-hand board. So we've got our 5/8 through fitting where our 2 power wire sections are going to go through, and then this is our plug-in for our nose steering servo. So that's exactly what we were talking about. On the other side, we're going to make this exact same plug for the power wires on the other side of the plane. So second board has been done up, so those are our left and right boards. We also did a version 2 of our battery holder. Now, point to the version 2. The version 1, I wasn't happy with the wall thickness. So the wall thickness on our sides, front and back, were 2 millimeters. And I also didn't like that sharp end, the 90-degree bend on the front. So I made this design up. It's exactly the same dimensions, but we've added 2 more millimeters all the way around the perimeter, and then we angled the sides there. It's also a lot stiffer, and I was worried that the version 1 would just snap and break. So this is a lot stronger. Didn't add much weight to anything, but we're going to replace that other battery tray with version 2. And the other thing we did was we got all of our devices mounted to some plywood, and those are now glued into the bottom of the fuselage. We made sure we sanded the fuselage first, then use high sol to mount those guys in. So this is going to be the order of our equipment. The reason we have our GSU mounted here is so engine lead can come out and go back to the engine right there, and everything else will just kind of fit in around this stuff. The position of these don't really matter, other than the Cortex needs to be on the center line. We've got it pointed forward and backwards. It's mounted to one of our normal mounts, and that's going to be our equipment location. So things are going together nicely. We're going to pull that front tray out and get that swapped out. All right, smoke tank is in place. We've got one loop on our vent line, and then this is going to come forward. I'm probably going to run the vent lines out right beside the lights here. So we'll have the fuel on one side and the smoke on the other side. So those vent lines will come and go right there, I think is going to be the ideal spot for them. Now I'm going to struggle a little bit in this area. Part of the reason is I still like things to be neat, but when you're jamming all this equipment underneath here and it's all getting hidden, it's very difficult to make a neat install, but I got to remember that this is all going to be hidden. So with the smoke tank in, we use some Loctite on the 4 bolts that hold that down. Now we're ready to reinstall the turbine. So that is going to go back in for the last time. All right, so we got our beacon light on the bottom here installed. We got both of our vent lines installed. So our fuel is the larger size one on this side. Our smoke is that side, which is a little bit smaller size, the regular size one. And the smoke tank's installed back there. We are making some good progress. All right, wire leads are all sorted. So we've run those through our through fittings underneath to this area here. And I've also put in our connector for our nose steering. Put a little dot of white paint there so it's marked with which direction is the signal. So what we'll do now is we are going to get this stuff screwed in. We still have to do all of our connectors and leads on the other side. So with these guys, it'll be fairly straightforward because we're going to have our turbine battery, which is one of our 3 cells. That comes right back to the turbine. Our other 3-cell battery on the other side, the other red one, that's going to feed our lighting system harness and our smoke pump, so the accessories on the aircraft. The 2 receiver batteries, those are going to come to the central box, and we're also going to have one of those batteries tee off to the landing gear. So we also have some zip tie connectors down here. I've used the 3M tape to put those in place. I've already put a bit of shoe goop around those guys to hold them in place so we can get these wires also run to there as well. So we got our pumps mounted in the fuselage, and while they've been curing, we have been working on our front board. So this goes towards the turbine or the back of the aircraft. So our fuel tank is going to come right to the UAT. This is our fill line, which goes underneath and comes to our dry brake port, which is here. So this is our filling port right there. And then our line coming to our turbine fuel pump is going to come from the middle one and goes through this fitting and right to the fuel pump fitting, which is right in this area right here. So I'll explain to you why I put the pumps where I did, and there's quite a bit of thought behind this. Well, not tons, doesn't take a lot of thought, but our primary receiver is going to be over here, receiver number 1. Receiver number 2, I think, is going to be up here. So I am going to put all of our lighting equipment and smoke pump are right on this side right here, so far away from those 2 things. And then our fuel pump for our turbine is back here, which is far away from anything. So that's going to keep everything separate, and then our V-Speak module is on this side over here, again, away from all those interference devices. So now that we got this set up, we can work on completing our power supplies, which we got done last night. So we've got our power leads all run back here. Some of them we just have to put an MPX connector on. Some we have to make some splits and stuff. So we're gonna get that stuff organized next. All right, so just been doing a whole bunch of wire cleanup here, getting everything plugged in. So we're all plugged in for all the leads coming from the different surfaces into our central box. Now what I'm working on right now is our V-Speak for the Swiwin and Swiwin setup. Now I'll tell you, I don't really understand why people struggle with this device so much. Yes, the instructions are a little bit bad, but it's a very straightforward device. And yeah, it's not hard to use at all. So right now I've got this plugged into my jetty box and I'm just making some adjustments to it. So I'm setting up the tank size, which I'm just putting in as 6 liters and going through everything. So it's got a bunch of different settings on here. Taxi tank, we are going to turn that feature off. So what the taxi tank is it won't start counting down the fuel until you go to full throttle once. So we'll just leave that off for now. We are using the jetty telemetry sensor setup. We're not using the bus setup. And we've got the fuel reserve alarm set to 1,000 or 1 liter, 1,000 milliliters. So 6 liter tank. Once you use 5 liters, it will alarm on your radio. So anyways, this is now programmed through our jetty box. And pretty straightforward device how this works. This lead right here plugs into your telemetry port in your Swiwin ECU. This lead right here, now you can do 2 things with this lead. You can plug it into your EXT port, but if you're using dual path, then you can plug it into your R3 port on your central box and set that up as a telemetry port. This lead here plugs into your throttle channel and that's it. It works. I've plugged it in before I programmed it. It works perfect. Okay, so we've got our V-Speak module reinstalled. We're going to turn our radio on. Radio's on. And we're going to pull our power plug. Or our bind plug. So there we go, we're back in. So when you double push this button real quick, it changes the radio system. So solid green is jetty. If you look at the manual, you just go tap, 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 and it cycles through all the different functions or radio systems. If you go through all the different radio systems, so if we change this right now and we had it set up as EX bus, it defaults back to its normal setup where you use the gray wire. So keep it simple, just use the gray wire. Okay, so you can see here on our screen, we've got all of our stuff from our V-Speak and this one up here, the status. Now, if you're using the V-Speak status, it's going to give you a number. This is a Lua app that actually tells you changes that number to what it actually means in English. So if you go to applications, down to the bottom, V-Speak status EX text, you have to pick Swiwin. You can pick any of the turbine brands, and you've got to have your one turbine set to status here. So it's actually taking that status, the number, and converting it. If you don't put anything in these two, it's not going to work. So we've got stop. If we trim up or stick up, goes into cooling mode. If we trim up, goes into ready. So that is the Lua app in action. We've got our fuel capacity there, so that'll count down as we're running the turbine. And that's pretty much it. So that is most of the electronics installed. We've got just a quick check of our other surfaces. One's moving incorrectly. Right rudder's correct. Nose wheel, right nose wheel's incorrect. So we do have some programming left to do, but we're still going to continue focusing on the electronics. Now our Cortex not plugged into the setup yet, so we are going to get that dealt with next. So we'll plug our receiver into our Cortex and get that programmed. Made a couple of those changes to our surfaces, so they're now moving the correct direction. And I just want to show you guys, I just plugged in the light battery, and let's turn the lights on. There's the bottom flasher. And our rear. That's awesome. So cool. Skycandy, I love your stuff. Oh, I'm getting pretty excited. It's getting close to test run time. Okay, so because of our Bluetooth setup, with our equipment hiding underneath the board, we're putting in 2 plugs here. So the reason for these plugs, number one is to have a spot for our GSU, for our turbine to plug into. The second one is to have a spot that runs to our Cortex for reprogramming. So we'll just put an extension, female port here. The other end goes into the Cortex programming port. So if you want to do reprogramming, let's say you do your maiden flight, and then you need to, what happens with the Cortex is if you trim too much, it won't do its double bump on startup. So that's always something you're looking for when you turn your plane on. You're waiting for the double bump on all your surfaces. That means everything's good. If it doesn't do the double bump, then you need to relearn your limits. That usually happens after a trimming event or on your maiden flight, as an example, where you trim out the airplane a bunch. So that's the whole point of that port, is we don't want to have to take the whole tray up just to access that port. Okay, so we've got all of our receivers and everything lined up to our gyro. We've got the goop installed on our connectors, and this is our hush box. So these hush boxes I make out of foam, and they basically stop the Cortex from making the rudder jiggle when you throttle up. It's a pretty common thing, especially on an airframe like this where you've got like a big open wide area. So we're not even going to bother testing it. We're just going to put a hush box around the Cortex and be done with that. So that portion is good. Next thing I'm doing here is I'm just waiting for my goop to cure a little bit. I'm going to turn the radio system on, get our brake and our gear plugged in because those aren't done yet. And we'll confirm all of our lines are good. We'll do a little bit of fastening here, and then we'll go through and we're going to shoe goop all of our connectors all over the place. All right, so we got our fuel tank bolted in, of course using Loctite on our 3 fasteners. We've got 1 fastener on the back and then 1 on each side of the strap or brace that goes over top. So these are our little labels for our Bluetooth setup. So specifically on this plane, we're going to have a GSU and a Cortex. Those labels are for our plugs, our extension plugs that we put on the main board. All right, so gear check here. So lights are on. There we go. Lights are off. Lights are on. Gear lights are currently off. And gear down. Lights are on. Holy man, look at that. And gear up. Super cool. Now we can add a bit of a delay as well too on those. So I've added a 4-second delay. Lights come on, and 4 seconds going up. Very cool. Okay, so the way we've got this set up here is we've got those lights on a logical switch, like I've explained. So if our master light switch is not in the on position, our lights are not going to work. So right now the gear is down with no lights working. Master switch on, and the gear will come on in 4 seconds. Crazy. These lights are bonkers. Oh my gosh. It's so hard to convey this on camera, but that is so nuts. It's a view from the side. And from the back. Lights off. I should say big shop lights off. Oh my gosh. The wing ones are just nuts. I think it also has to do with the reflector as well, but holy. Wow. Skycandy. Very well done. You guys did an amazing job on the setup. It is stunning. So I cannot say enough about those lights. They are stunning. Yeah. So we've got all of our stuff done underneath the board. So our gear system is set up. What I did was I put the pulse ratio on the brakes I set that up, and I also set the limit up as well too. So I'll show you in here. So if we go to setup, brake, pulse ratio 1 to 8, so that means it pulses like ABS, right? And then we've got our limits on our brakes, which is 80%. I found will be good. It's pretty strong, but not enough to lock up. And we don't use any of the gyro functions through here, so that's not important. So now we are ready to pop that board down. We'll just do another final check on our goop on connectors, and that's awesome. All right, and we've got our plate in, our tank is plumbed, our vent is plumbed, and things are looking good. We've got our antennas mounted as well too for our 2 receivers. So this is receiver number 2, so we've got an antenna going sideways. This is a duplicate forward backwards. And then we've got one going up and down and one pointing forward backwards. So those are done. The last things we have to check over here or get hooked up is our lines for the turbine and the smoke system. So we've got our valve holders here. These are available on our website. These are Pisco-Fesco valve holders. And we're gonna get these things mounted in place. And I'm pretty sure I'm gonna glue them right in that area. Usually I would screw them down, but in this case the glue setup is going to be perfect. So this side will be our line going to our turbine for fuel, and then we'll have another one mounted on this side coming to our smoke stick, and that is one of the final steps here. All right, there she is, the first time on her own legs and looking absolutely dapper. Now as far as the CG goes, we've got about 3/4 of a tank of fuel right now. And on an empty tank with no canopy on, it would tip backwards if I went past there. So I think we're not too far off on the CG, just as a rough guess. I know this plane, when you're landing, is going to be very light on the nose, or at least that's what it looks like in video so far. So we've confirmed the capacity of our fuel tank. And we did that with our fueling system from RC Custom 3D Printing. Thank you, Joe, for this. This is a great fueling system. It basically tells us how much we put in, how much we take out, and it's got an automatic setting as well too. So once this plane, for example, is programmed, like my Super Elan here, I can just go in, push Super Elan, and it fills it up from empty with exactly 6 liters in there. So Rebel is also put in there as well too. So very cool system, absolutely love it. So we're ready to do a test run on this thing. This is gonna be fun. So we'll get everything set up for the test run, and basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through our normal procedure. So we're going to let the turbine steady out at idle. We are going to do a slow acceleration to max. We're gonna let max idle, stabilize, and then we're gonna bring it back down. We're gonna confirm that the acceleration speed is good. We're gonna do a restart test on it as well too, and we'll just do some general runs on it. So as we go through this, I'll put up on the screen exactly what's happening during this run up on this aircraft. All right, for everybody that is overly concerned, I've got my fire extinguisher, my blower, my hearing protection, and we have everything set up ready to go. The plane's on. We've got our GSU plugged in to our GSU port. That's perfect. Other thing that worked out good here is because these power box connectors are clear, the light from the ECU, the turbine ECU down below, actually makes them glow. So we can see exactly what the ECU is doing right now. That's pretty cool. And start, lights on, lights off. Now I did prime the fuel pump all the way to the engine. We've got a couple bubbles coming still, but I think we should be just fine. start check. The other thing I was checking during that test run was whether our hush box was working on our rudder, and it was nice and solid, so everything's working perfect there. That's going to be a fun combination. A 240 in this BDX is going to be an absolute blast. That's cool. Very nice. All right, so everything ran very well with the Swewin 240. That was perfect. Everything's working great on that. No issues at all. The restart was very fast, and very happy with how everything worked. We are going to get our programming done. So we've got a little bit of programming to do with the flaps, ailerons, elevators, rudder, that stuff. So a little bit of programming there. Everything's basically going to be set up as per the instruction sheet. So what we're going to do is we're going to go with like a mid-range on our aileron throws here as an example. So I'll probably set that to 18 millimeters. Flaps, obviously full is mechanical. We've got a little bit of elevator to mix in there. Elevator will go probably on the higher side, so like 12 millimeters. Rudder as much as possible. And then we are going to add some differential in for the ailerons. And that is going to be the next thing that we set up. So pretty normal stuff. Obviously any radio system's a little bit different, but that's the next step. All right, guys, so we ended up adding 300 grams to the nose. That is just slipped underneath the battery tray there. So without the front canopy on, no fuel in the tank. You can see here, it slowly drops down, but if you get past that halfway mark, then the tail goes down. With the canopy on, it's just a little bit more nose heavy. I'm showing you this because sometimes this is really the feeling, the balance point. So we also have all of our throws laid out here as well too. So that's all done. The flaps off. This is more for the owner than anything. Flaps off are a little bit buzzy. It's just the servo. It's not resistance. It's still loose there. We're not binding anywhere. So anyways, yeah. So that is, surfaces are all set up, and travels are all programmed in there. There we go. So I'll show you guys a little bit of what I do here. We've talked about this on other projects, but I'll share with it as well too on this one. So if we go to fine tuning, dual rate expo, so we can see here all of our different rates. We don't use dual rates. This is just to adjust our travels, but we have that set up with flight mode. So if you look here on the expo side, you'll see that the expo goes up when we turn our gyro off. This is currently our gyro off switch. So we turn our gyro off, our expo goes up. The point of that is to keep the feeling the same. So when you turn your gyro off, your gyro naturally adds expo to the system. So when you turn your gyro off, that expo disappears. So we add more expo on the gyro off setting to try and make it feel more similar. I find 10% is pretty good, usually 15 is better, but you kind of have to get the feel for it and see. But that's as a default, I always add 10% more with the gyro off on my different rate settings. So we've got the same rates all the way throughout. The only thing is on full flaps, we've got a little bit more aileron, a little bit more elevator, 5%, not a big deal. But you can see here again, we've got our expo going up as soon as we turn that gyro off. So that's how we've got that set up, and should be good. We've got a little bit of elevator compensation for down elevator as the manual suggests, or the data sheet. So we've added 4 millimeters of forward or down elevator, and that can be trimmed out on the maiden flight as well, but that is programming complete. All right, so just looking at this project as a whole, what are some of the things we could do to eliminate some of that nose weight? Now, the nose weight doesn't really affect anything. I mean, we put 300 grams in the nose. It's just under 3/4 of a pound. We could have gone with heavier batteries. You know, we've got two 5000s, we've got two 3300s. So those 3 cells could be 5000s, but there's not really a need for it. Especially when you're using the same batteries throughout different aircraft. It's helpful just to have those same batteries that go between aircraft, I find anyways. So we could have moved the UAT a little bit further forward to perhaps right here. The downside with moving the UAT more forward is that creates more resistance in your tubing, right? So you got this tube here that goes between your UAT and your main fuel tank, and then the further we get away from our fuel pump, the longer that lead has to be. So those are some of the considerations. Is it a big deal? Not really. You know, if we move it 4 inches further forward, I don't know if we would really save that much weight. So it's expected that the BDX needs weight in the nose, which is totally normal. But there she is, just looking over some final details here. One of the last things I need to do is put some safety wire on my fuel tubing right there. And we are essentially done. We're wrapped up. We're good. This thing is ready to maiden. Well guys, that wraps up the BDX from Elite Aerosports. A couple notes here. What a fun plane to put together. I am really looking forward to getting mine. This plane is very well built, very strong, and a nice size aircraft as well. Thanks to Skycandy Landing Lights for setting us up with the lighting system. I know it was just in pre-production, but definitely gets my thumbs up of approval. Phenomenal install kit. The lenses, the templates and everything were absolutely top notch, and this plane is going to absolutely pop in the sky. Couple notes for you guys. 2 things I'll mention. Number 1 is channel membership. Right now, channel members can see 4 videos ahead of time. So if you want to see the videos early before they get released on the YouTube page, definitely check out channel membership. There's some links down below. And the last thing is the Lighter Side of RC After Dark. That's our live channel, completely separate channel. Every 2 weeks we do a live stream here from the shop. If you're on the live stream, you get to communicate with us, ask us questions. It's tons of fun. Usually have some fun guests here, and it's just a good time for 2 hours on a Saturday night. So thanks guys so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.